Alright, everyone, welcome back. This is Roll, aka Rayo, and I'm here today to talk about Elden Ring, as you can clearly see. So, today, as of this recording, Namco Bandai and From Software have released a 15-minute gameplay video of Elden Ring. Very exciting. We've only seen small snippets of this game, so this is the first time we're going to see a very full gameplay viewing of Elden Ring. Prolonged shots, not quick cuts. So we're going to get a really good idea of what this game is going to be like in terms of gameplay, and the things that you can do, the things that you'll see. So it's really exciting. I've seen this video already. This isn't a reaction, by the way. This is more of like a quick look at at the contents, and I'll be looking at things like the art, the combat mechanics, and whatever else really catches my eye, to be honest. The lore. I have to say, I'm not going to be looking at things from an expert point of view in terms of all those separate little categories. There's many channels on YouTube that do a far better job in terms of those individual components like the lore or the combat. But I'm just so excited about Elden Ring. I'm so excited that we're finally getting a new game from Software that's following along with the tradition of Dark Souls and Demon Souls and all of that. Uh, so let's just get right into it. Let's just see. We'll watch some stuff and we'll pause and we'll talk.
Hello everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. In this video, we'll show some footage of our new action RPG, Elden Ring. We hope it helps to convey a little of this title's mood and gameplay.
The mood and the gameplay.
Elden Ring is set here, in the lands between.
Did you see that guy that was hung? There's a guy that's getting hung right to the left. Let's go back real quick. I didn't notice that. Look at that. That's unfortunate for that guy. Everything else about this shot is quite beautiful. Right? Like typically with Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Bloodborne, we're so used to dead things, right? Dead and deceased and grimy things, dark, and yet here we are. Most of it is so lush in terms of the grass and the vegetation. Some dead trees here, some collapsed ruins back there, but for the most part, this giant tree. For the most part, it's such a lively shot. And then here on the left is a dead guy.
Elden Ring is set here, in the lands between.
The lands between.
This is a site of
Boletaria
grace,
from
acting as a
the
place of rest
the
for
past
player.
games. Lordran.
Occasionally, grace will manifest rays of guiding light.
Talk to that person. And right there,
Of course,
the
we're free to choose whether to follow this guidance, or head off to
the
explore in a
site of
different
grace. That's like the bonfire for this game. And they said just there that you can follow along the path that the grace kind of shows you, or you can just deviate from the main path and go wherever you want. That kind of reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus and how you could like follow the light lines. Here comes a big dragon. By the way, the dragon killed all the enemies, and then you got the souls, or I'm guessing it's called grace. It like kind of went right into you. So we're gonna see something right here. Magic being cast from horseback. That's pretty interesting. You can cast. Possibly you can cast anything from foot. You can also do while mounted. That's pretty cool. And you can also do normal slashing attacks from horseback. You're gonna see that. So it looks like you can do a decent amount of stuff from your mount, including fighting and magic and possibly shooting arrows. Here's like a critical visceral attack right in the eye. Very cool. And just back to my earlier point, I was saying that the site of grace creates these lines that you kind of follow to get to like your main path, and they say you can deviate from it Um, Shadow of the Colossus had something similar, and I'm pretty sure that Hidetaka Miyazaki has gone on record as saying that he's been quite influenced by Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. So there's just a little kind of connection there
Can you
too.
hear me? Help me. I'm stuck. Hello?
We're gonna see a new character.
Please? Anyone? Oh, my stars. I'm so happy to see you. I am Alexander, son of the
Alexander.
Iron
And I
Fist.
was thinking that
And as
this
you can
guy,
see, I'm
there's a guy in the
stuck
pot.
here.
No.
Please,
This character is the
can you
pot
help me out
itself.
of this?
This pot monster, jar monster.
Put those doubts to rest. I'll be just fine.
You can see that the
Very
trees
well,
are
sir.
fluttering around in the background.
If
That's really
you're
cool.
all
Kind of
I
reminds me of The Witcher. So so this kind of reminds me of the Onion Knight from past games. Uh, the Onion Knight would get into trouble and you'd kind of bail him out from time to
Well
time.
played, good sir.
And it
Well,
seems to me maybe that this guy will be like kind of like a quest line. Maybe you'll see him throughout the world and you'll kind of bail him out just like you did now. And if you complete his quest line, maybe he'll give you an item. Alternatively, perhaps you can just kill him outright right now. He does mention, you'll hear him mention that he was almost going to die if your attacks were almost stronger. And maybe if you kill him, you can get whatever's inside of him.
played. Oh, that mighty wallop of yours almost spelled the end of me.
So here's something interesting. Take a look right now. One, two trees. I really thought that from all the screenshots and the early footage that we had seen, that there was only just the one big tree. I thought that there was one large tree that was like almost like a substitute sun in some ways, and that it was so large that in all the shots that we had seen the tree, it was the very same tree, acting almost like a landmark that you would see everywhere. But I believe there's like three trees. Let's take a look. There's like a little town back there in the corner. See, one, two, three trees, possibly even more. And this is big stuff. This is big. This is the map, and from software games, at least the modern games that we've been playing for all these years, typically they did not have maps. Uh, the map was really something that you'd have to build in your mind in terms of the geography of the stages, right? But here we're seeing a map, and that's really a necessity for a game of this nature because it's an open world, right? And they're going to mention that you can create markers to create points of interest. That's all fine, but what's noteworthy here is that it says early day, and then there's a sun, and I'm wondering if there's a day-night cycle. I I don't think that they've said anything about that just yet, uh, but that would be very interesting. I mean, most open world games do have a day-night cycle, right? Like Witcher, Grand Theft Auto, so on and so forth. Dragon's Dogma. But I'm wondering if you can also manipulate this, if you can, make it go into night, into day, and are the enemies going to change? Depending on if it's nighttime or daytime. We all know that in Dragon's Dogma, at nighttime, uh, the enemies become much harder. That was really cool, so I wonder if they'll do something like that.
Map can prove useful when exploring the world, and is populated by acquiring map fragments.
So people have already assembled this map. They've kind of took screen caps of each portion of this map and then assembled it all together. And we see a decent amount of this game world. But they do mention just now that the map is assembled through fragments, right? So I'm thinking that, say, this is a fragment that they have not found, and eventually you'll find it and you'll be able to understand and explore more areas than we're seeing just currently here. But at the same time, I don't think that placing that getting these map fragments uh, then allows you to explore these areas. I just think that the fragments kind of, how to say, the fragments just help you understand the geography of the world through the map. Not that the fragments are thus creating more parts for you to explore. I don't think that's the case, but I could be wrong. You can actually see kind of the seams where the fragments begin and end, right?
We can use
There's a big
markers to
tree.
customize the map, such as setting reminders for the location of crafting materials or
I
dangerous
wonder
enemies.
if this blue area here is water. I'm not really sure. These are rivers.
Beacons can also be placed to
There's a
help
lot
with
of
orientation.
long bridges throughout, which is interesting.
Beacons placed on the map
There's a beacon.
appear in the world.
So here I'd actually like to talk about something that we haven't yet seen about Elden Ring. So all From Software games, at least in their modern era, except for Sekiro, have included a messaging system whereby other players can passively interact with other players by creating messages, and then I can be exploring the world, see these messages, and I can get helpful information about the enemies, about items. I can get trolled and fall off a cliff, thinking that there's something off the cliff. You guys know the deal. We haven't seen anything like that yet, but for the longest time, I've been kind of wanting From Software to revolutionize, to evolve this mechanic. It's essentially been the same ever since Demon Souls, all the way to Bloodborne. And I'm thinking it would be kind of neat if you could also, in some fashion, create markers on the map in a passively online way, maybe with your friends to minimize the clutter that would populate a map. But maybe, like, you know, I have someone on my friends list who's also playing this game. He can, like, create a marker here. Maybe it's colored differently. And then that indicates to me when I'm playing my game, like, hey, my friend saw something interesting here. Maybe I can go there. That might be neat. I'm just saying. They've never said anything along those lines, so we don't really know what they're going to do in terms of the messaging system. This is really great. I really love
Spirit springs can be used while on horseback.
I really love that Spirit Spring. When I first saw it in the original trailer, I didn't think it looked that great. It looked kind of cheesy to me. But just right there, that looked great. It just looked really thrilling and fun to do, right? Now, here's where I'd like to mention a few months back, Eurogamer and Alfie Watson, I think her name is. I'll link to the article in the description below. But she mentions that she had a preview of this game. She watched a preview of it, and she talked about how the mount here is not available for use in co-op. The mount is single player only, which I think is pretty disappointing, to be honest, because the idea of, like, being with my pals and just roaming on horseback. They've called it a horse, by the way. Earlier in my original video, which I'll link to, I said it was kind of like more like a goat, judging by its physique and its horns and the fact that it, like, is, you know, kind of leaping, and even the way it moves. But they do call it a horse here, I think. But yeah, the idea of roaming around, galloping around this open world with your friends, that's just a really great kind of fantasy idea that isn't going to happen in this game. And I'm thinking it might have to do with multiplayer, the limitations of multiplayer. So we know from all the past Souls games that, once you join a multiplayer session, you're kind of sectioned off, right? There's 2 or 3 people, and then you can, like, they kind of section off areas with like fog gates, so you can't really explore everywhere. And I think effectively having you not use your mount in multiplayer serves a similar function, because as you saw just there, the mount kind of jumps from one level, from one area to another, right? And so maybe maybe the map is structured in a way that like that the mounts kind of can get to area, and those areas are kind of like zoned off. And when you're in multiplayer, you're just in this zoned off area. I don't know if I'm explaining that as well as I can, but that's kind of the vague idea that I have
Back to launch
why
high
it works
into
the way
air.
it does.
This allows for stress-free traversal of areas with a great deal of verticality.
And that idea just there, that there's a great deal of verticality in the traversal, is really cool to me, just because when you think of open worlds, you think of like, especially in a fantasy setting, I don't know, I think of like just very flat lands. And when we see many of these shots, it's actually not flat at all. There's a lot of dimensionality to the landscape, which is really cool. And who is this guy over here? Is he the one causing the lightning? I don't know. He's not. And look at that. There's like goats and animals. This game has endemic life. If you want to use the Monster Hunter World term, there you're gonna see some eagles. And I'm thinking you're gonna have to kill those animals to harvest their materials for crafting, and you're gonna see crafting real soon.
The carriage over there is carrying treasure, an opportunity too good to pass up.
So we saw a carriage like this earlier in the trailer and in a couple of
We'll
shots.
prepare for combat with some item crafting.
Take a look at that.
Using materials found in the world.
Crafting, and I'm assuming crafting is going to happen in real time, right? The game is going on in the background. And yeah, see a flight pinion found by hunting birds. We saw those birds earlier, animal bones. You'll be able to craft and make stuff. I think that's pretty neat. By the way, this character's level 22. Runes held 1198. Is runes kind of like the currency in terms of leveling up? Vigors, HP, mind, that's going to be for MP. Endurance, stamina, strength, obviously. Dexterity, intelligence, for magic, I guess, as well? I'm not sure. What's the difference between... Oh yeah, intelligence will be magic. The strength of your magic. Faith, arcane. These all seem fairly similar to what we've seen before. Equipment load, medium load. That's pretty nice that they tell you right there what kind of weight you have, and I guess that's going to relate to rolling. Poise, discovery, interesting. Memory slots. What's that all about? I don't know. It's crouching right now. So I've never played Sekiro, and so stealthing around, crouching, stealth kills, jumping, these are all things that were in Sekiro that I'm not too familiar with in a Souls game, and you'll be doing that kind of stuff here. A lot of the sound effects, a lot of the animations are fairly similar to what we've seen in old games, so that right there was really interesting. That was a jumping attack that caused a stagger, and then you moved in to do a critical visceral, if you want to call it, right? And that's really interesting because they're going to say shortly, let's watch a little bit more.
Enemy stance can be broken with heavy strikes, such as when attacking from above.
So enemy stance can be broken with heavy attacks, such as attacking from above, and he did a jumping attack.
Can also be interchanged between.
That makes me think of how's that going to play out in multiplayer, in PvP, if there is indeed PvP. I really don't know. Is there going to be a lot of people jumping around doing jumping attacks? And there's more to talk about jumping attacks in this game, as we'll see.
Weapons.
So those are all attacks. some of those parts we've seen before in other FromSoft games. The slash into a backflip, we've seen that, but then this character was able to dash in and then deliver the final blow. All of this makes me think of how you're going to be fluidly moving in and out of combat with melee attacks and magic and dashing and traversal moves. All of it seems to me like it's going to mix in very fluidly, and we're going to see a whole lot more magic as it goes on. They never show what the treasure is. Though there's other treasures that they'll find. Oh, very interesting stuff here.
Summon spirits to assist us in battle.
Oh, there was the jumping attack.
Vary greatly in type, so we look forward to players experimenting and finding their personal favorites.
Okay, let's talk about that real quick. So, again, going back to the Eurogamer article, they talk about these spirits, and I'm just going to read a little snippet from the article just to elaborate on this more. One new mechanic in Elden Ring is that players are able to summon spirits from the ashes of the deceased. So that sounds like the official name of what these things are, the ashes of the deceased, and fight alongside them. These seem to serve a similar purpose to how summonable NPCs work in Dark Souls, except instead of finding a summon sign on the ground, these individuals are activated via an item. So that's very important right there. From says that there are many different types of these spirit summons, from tanky defenders to damage dealers, allowing players to come up with different strategies on the fly. Apparently, these spirits can only be summoned when the game is in single-player mode. If you're in a co-op party, you won't be able to use them at all. So there's a lot that we can get from this, and again, I'll link to the article later, but or rather in the description. But it seems to me like using these spirits from the ashes of the deceased, as they're called, it seems to me like this is going to be something for single-player gamers only, right? You cannot use these in multiplayer, so you might want to explicitly create a build just to take advantage of these things, and then maybe make another build where you're not going to employ these things at all. And also, a key piece of information there is that they are used via an item. And I was thinking initially that they may be some kind of thing that you slot into your weapon, but that's not the case. It sounds like it's an item, and I'm really interested in terms of how does one acquire these items? Do you have to do quests, and then you'll learn more about these characters, these deceased spirits, before you acquire the item? Maybe you have to do a quest. Who knows? But it would be really neat if they were, if they each had their own story, right? That would be really cool. And there's a bit more to talk about these guys, but we'll save that for later. There's another jumping attack. It was with 2 swords, but it didn't create the stagger, I don't think. He had to do another attack to open him up. There's a guy sitting down right there on the left. So we're going to see some co-op.
Online multiplayer can also be enjoyed
area
with players from other worlds, from cooperative to PvP and invasions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll mention something else later, if hopefully I remember. About the summoning the spirits. This guy's ignoring all the items. It's actually really bothering me. This seems very Bloodborne to me, this enemy.
This forest, so we'll use stealth to avoid detection.
More stealthing around. The armor designs look really great. This NPC helper reminds me of Man-Eater Mildred from Dark Souls, I think. But yeah, the armor designs look great. They're not too exaggerated. They seem plausible from like a historical perspective, I guess. So here we are.
We've come across a boss guarding this area.
We've come across a boss guarding this area. Just quickly, I'll mention that that's very interesting. There's no there's no like fog gate to sort of hint that there's a boss coming up, at least in the open world. So perhaps you can be just adventuring around and then boom, you're attacked by a boss. That would be really that would be pretty scary, but pretty fun, I think. This guy's using his spear. Ooh. So notice the magic attack just now. This is a really big thing for me, at least. So I've talked already about how some of these animations, these are all legacy animations, many of them at least, from past From Software games. We all are familiar with the sword swipes and all of that. That's all very typical From Software animations, dating all the way back to Demon Souls even. But casting this magic missile attack, it wasn't simply just pointing out your staff and then it shoots out, and then if you want to shoot out a second attack, it's the same animation that plays again. Instead, he's like waving his arm around and it casts once, twice, 3 times, and he's, swinging it from left and right. That's really cool. I like that. It just seems, it's just a nice animation touch. There's another jumping attack, and it did seem to cause a stagger there. Very cool. We're going to see the helper use a very interesting weapon. Oh, this is really cool. All these little lights go up into the sky, into a cloud vortex, and then rain down. That's really neat. The attacks. Okay, see, check out this dragon head flamethrower, and we're going to see that later. We're going to see a boss use that later. So magic seems really, they really are kind of selling you on magic in that one segment, and some more later on, and that leads me to believe that that you're just going to be fluidly using melee, movement, jumping attacks, and magic. Like, at least that's available to you if you choose to do so. I'm sure that people are going to focus just on melee or focus just on magic, but it seems to me like they wanted to sell you on this idea that you are going to be kind of going in and out of using all of those options, which is pretty neat. This is something significant here. Take a look. A big drop and no fall damage. It doesn't seem like you took any fall damage doing that. So in terms of exploration, that's something you're going to have to keep in mind. So you're really going to be able to look around and explore these areas and take some big drops and survive them for the purposes of exploration. That's pretty neat. There's a State of Grace. We're going into a dungeon now. And what is the State of Grace? It looks like a feather. I don't know.
Mines, and other
is it a feather, or is it just like this magical shape? Take a look at the skeleton. Okay. Okay, there's something I want to quickly mention about that skeleton. You saw that he kind of like bopped his head to kind of fix his skull onto his neck. It's just a funny little animation, right? And I think we've seen that even as far back as Dark Souls. But it's just funny, right? And even the pot monster character, Alexander, is kind of humorous, kind of comedic. And I'm hoping that this game actually has a bit more humor to it compared to recent From Software efforts, which are very serious, very dark, very grimy kind of experiences. And overall, that is From Software's recent efforts, it's fair to say. But I think back to Dark Souls and how it had a bit of comedy, a bit of levity to it. In particular, like Framped, right, is a very goofy-looking creature, and I'm just hoping that there's just a little bit of humor and lightness to this game, in contrast to what we normally see in recent From Software efforts.
Each hold their own secrets.
Just a little bit of humor.
Treasures to fearsome bosses.
Nice traps. I always like traps in From games. It's always fun. This guy here reminds me of the man in the iron mask, and I think he's a co-op partner, I think. Although he's not glowing. He's kind of showing you the way to a treasure. Later in this next shot, he does appear to be glowing red. Yeah, so he seems to be a co-op partner. But he reminds me of the man in the iron mask. And there are some older shots that show him. Or maybe he's a specific character. I don't know. So here's the waifu, the bonfire waifu, whatever you want to call.
Greetings,
Hub world waifu.
traveler from beyond the fog.
And look, lip sync.
I am Melina.
Melina. Finally lip sync. I think Dark Souls 2 had like the witches early on, and their lips moved as they talked. But for the most part, most From Software games, and she has scars on her arms, on her hand. I didn't notice that before. She has like this tattoo covering her eye.
Offer you an accord.
An accord. And let's pause the game real quick. What is an accord? I don't know, but I'm thinking that she'll be available at any of these Site of Graces or whatever they're called. She'll just sort of materialize as you saw just there, for you to level up anywhere that you can find one of those bonfire alternatives, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it's just significant that she has lip sync. I think that really kind of indicates that From Software is really kind of upping their game, so to speak. We're in 2021 now. It's the next generation, and I think it's a style. Many people have seen it as a stylistic choice that FromSoft games usually don't have lip sync. So I'm glad that they're kind of trying to change things up in advance.
We've reached Stormville Castle, a large-scale dungeon which connects seamlessly with the surrounding Limgrave region.
Stormville Castle in the Limgrave region. I would like to find this area on the map that they shown previously. I'm pretty sure someone else has already done that. But I'd be interesting to see where it is geographically. Maybe you can get some clues as to, from the surrounding areas and relate that to the map.
Aren't you? I would advise against taking the main gate into the castle.
So the thing on this guy's chest here, it seems like it's like a shackle or what do they call it? Like a stockade, where you put your hands through. And his wrists do look bloody. We're eventually going to see that the lord of this region has quite the obsession with hands. So this might be part of like the overall theming and motif for this region. And maybe I'll mention that right now real quick. In the original video that I had, that I put up about Elden Ring from the first reveal, I mentioned that I felt like that the visual style of this game was kind of all over the place. When you compare it to, say, Bloodborne, which had a very cohesive look, Victorian, right? And Dark Souls, which was like a dark fantasy look. This game kind of goes from one thing to another, all sorts of different visual styles, including the ones I mentioned just now. And I felt like that was a little... what's the word? It just seemed a little confusing from a visual standpoint, the way that they went from style to style within this game. But having given it more thought, to me it makes actually a whole lot more sense now, because if this is indeed a giant open world game, right? And we're going to go from region to region, from the north to the south, and visiting different castles each with their own culture, right? Then it makes sense that stylistically each of these castles and cultures would have their own visual style, right? So maybe this region is all about hands and arms, but another region could be obsessed about wolves and gothic stuff.
It's tightly guarded by hardened old hands. Oh, try the opening right here. The guards don't know about it.
This guy's being helpful.
The castle undetected.
He's like, no. He chooses no.
Fair enough. You certainly don't have to trust me.
I was like,
if you must go through
Is
the
this guy
gates, I'll
Patches?
signal them to open.
But ultimately, I think he was telling the
Of course,
truth.
I'd advise against it. The gates! Open the gates!
Was he telling the truth? Oh, it's Bloodborne all over again, getting shot up. He quickly is like, forget about that. 2 sips,
main
2
route
chugs
seems
of
risky,
the Estus,
so we'll try
one
entering
right after
through a
the
back
other,
way.
jumping around. I'm really gonna have to get used to the jumping. It's just not something that I initially would ever think about. Look at this. Using the spirits again. But this time the spirits didn't remain. It was like they just appeared, did their attack, and then vanished. So you're gonna have options. They're not all the same. Some will be able to remain and act almost like a summonable NPC that will stay and help you fight until they die, and some will just appear and then vanish. That seems to be the case. So yeah,
Extra
there's a
care
lot
should
of
be taken
variety.
when moving through dungeons, as visibility
This
and
seems
terrain differ from when in the open.
More typical to
We
your
hope players enjoy getting a feel for the different types of
to your
areas and coming up with
Dark
suitable
Souls
strategies
kind
for
of
each.
experience, closed off dungeons. What's the #1 rule, dude? Keep your shield up and move slowly. We're seeing arms being hung up on hooks, and we're gonna encounter who's really obsessed with these arms. So I'd like to talk about just the level design layout here. It's just really compact, and because of the jumping, you're gonna be able to explore these areas in different ways that you wouldn't be able to before. And here's another big jump coming up that I think in another game you would have possibly taken fall damage, but
Dungeons
I
are
don't know.
complex and
It doesn't seem
multi-layered,
like you will.
meaning they can be tackled from a number of routes.
And we're gonna meet Big Hat Logan right here.
Nice to meet you.
It seems as though
Roger is the name.
Roger. It seems as though he has an earring, which is pretty neat. But yeah, this guy kind of reminds me of Big Hat Logan. He looks really cool. I like his outfit. I'm sure that you'll be able to get this outfit for yourself eventually. Dead body with an item, and I was looking at this sculpture statue here. It's like this tree-like structure with flowers or flames, and it's like engulfing a figure. Very interesting. And another tree-like branch here. So yeah, branches and trees, this is a big thing in this game. We're seeing it all over the place. There's many reoccurring themes, right? Much in the same way that all Souls games, whether it be an obsession with souls or blood or eyes, the dark humanity, there's always like this one or two themes that they kind of continually hammer home in Souls games and FromSoft games, and this time it's going to be trees and arms, and you can kind of relate them together, right? Like the arms of the branches of a tree.
What are you doing here in Stormville Castle?
They all kind of somehow have this resonance with one another.
Sacrifice our kind for grafting. Not exactly
Grafting.
a place I'd stroll into without a purpose in mind.
They sacrifice our kind for grafting, and we're going to see the grafting very, very soon. That eagle that we saw just there had like chains on it. It seems to be kind of like an enslaved eagle that's forced to fight, maybe. And yeah, you can just explore all sorts of different ways thanks to jumping. That's really, really interesting to me, and to me, I'm wondering about the level design. How tightly are they going to make the levels?
In this next boss fight, we
Because of the
challenge one
jumping.
of the demigods,
Here's the
ruler of Stormvale, Godric the Golden.
So here's the fog gate, classic fog gate, and we're going to be facing Godric the Golden. And yeah, you're gonna see what exactly is collecting all the arms they mentioned for grafting. And by the way, Godric derives from Old English. God, obviously, we know what God means. And then there's the Rick part, which comes from powerful, mighty, great, high-ranking, rich, wealthy. So it seems like a very appropriate name for this lord. And in fact, they called him a demigod. So one thing I'll mention here, let's get a better shot before we get into this.
Thou art a true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred.
Oh, kindred. So is he like a dragon?
Me unto greater heights.
Greater heights. Let's take a look at this guy. There's the lip sync again. Very nice. 2 axes. So, yeah. Talk about the grafting. Yeah, here's all the hands that have been collected. Called us a lonely tarnished right now. Tarnished is somewhat the equivalent of being a hollow or a hunter in the past games. Now you're a tarnished. So at the start of this battle, right before we got into the arena, they called Godric a demigod. And I'll mention now that that's really interesting because of George R. Martin's involvement with this game. Now, it should be fairly common knowledge at this point that George R. R. Martin is writing not the entire story of Elden Ring. He's not writing, the point A to point B events of the current present story of Elden Ring, but rather he's writing the history and the lore of Elden Ring, much in the same way that in all the old games, you'll learn about the history and the past of Dark Souls, etc., through the items and through talking to other characters. You'll learn about the history and all the gigantic epic events that have occurred in the past. George R. R. Martin would have created and wrote this story for this character here, Godric. He's going to be a character who is involved with all of those historical gigantic events, right? And much in the same way that you would go on to fight Gwyn, who was again a character that was involved with all the big events in that game. You're going to be fighting here, Godric, here in the present story of the game. So he kind of acts as this bridge between the history of Elden Ring and the current present events of Elden Ring. There's more I'd like to talk about that, but we'll get into that a bit later. It's also worth noting that they called him a demigod, and so unlike Gwyn, who is very much considered a godlike character, right? And the dragons in Dark Souls are the equivalent of the Titans, which were like these even larger than life figures that predated the gods. This character here, Godric, is a demigod, so you would associate that more with someone like Hercules, to use Greek mythology.
Plain as a lord. I command thee.
And so yeah, they mentioned the grafting.
Lord of all that is golden.
He's got all these hands now, thanks to the grafting. They really like hands, but is that a theme throughout the entire series, the game, or is that a theme just exclusively to this culture here? I don't know. Missed, he whiffed. So Godric here in his first phase has a lot of wind attacks. You can see that there's like wind swirling around as he moves around. And you'll see that changes as the battle goes on. So let's talk about this little guy. This is another helper here. This is another summonable spirit, ashes of the fallen spirits or whatever. And this is the kind that, again, is going to act like an NPC that helps and fights with you, right? Much in the same way that that NPCs would help you in the old games, right? But it seems to me that they've done away with that system where you would have to find their symbol on the ground, and often they were actually hidden under jars and stuff like that to help you fight bosses or clear out a stage. And instead, as mentioned before, they're going to be usable through an item. So you'll be able to use them wherever you go, so long as you're playing single player, by the way, not co-op. And that's a really interesting choice just because, again, it relates to the level design of these games rather than like a lore reason or whatever, right? So if they were going to use the old style, just imagine how difficult it would be to find these symbols, to find the summoning markers throughout the gigantic open world, or these big complex stages, right, that you can jump throughout, right? And that's not even considering the AI being able to keep up with you because you're going to be jumping around all over the place, right? The pathing of the AI. This is just a more elegant solution to give you the same effect without having to go around and search for these markers, and they're just going to always be available to you. So that's really nice and convenient. And he dies. Really interesting design for that character. It's so specific that it makes me wonder, like, are we going to be learning about their stories? I hope so. So here's like phase 2. He's got a dragon thing, and remember from the fight against the knight that the NPC helper was, or rather, it wasn't an NPC. It was a co-op, a player co-op, was able to use a similar dragon head, if not the same dragon head, and use it as a flamethrower. However, this player, or rather this boss here, perhaps with the same head, is able to use it in a far more elaborate, exaggerated ways. Very, very strong, very powerful, and very cool. And I'll mention right now that the wind attacks before in phase 1 have now combined with the dragon fire to create like a fire tornado. A Sharknado dragon tornado. And also quickly, just about the dragons, he mentioned something about being kin. So perhaps dragons are also interpreted as godlike beings, and that he's a demigod, right? So they're like dragon kin. But I wonder if when you defeat Godric here, do you sever his arm, his dragon arm, and then you get it? I don't know. So yeah, you can see that his attacks have fiery, swirling attacks now. Big range. Scoop. He's laughing as... That's just great. That is just great.
Thank you for watching.
This
was just a brief introduction.
There's just
to
a
Elden
little more
Ring's
that they're going to show. We'll watch that,
but more details
and then we'll
will
wrap
be
things
revealed
up.
at a later date. There's not long to go now before release.
Not long to go now.
In the meantime, we greatly appreciate your continued support.
The Tarnished will soon return.
The Tarnished. There's the wolf.
Someone must extinguish thy flame.
That's another boss. Different boss.
They will fight. And they
These all
will
look like
die.
bosses.
For how else is a champion?
That seems very Bloodborne, that shot right there. Look, scooped up. I love that. The guy did try to do a fancy jumping attack. A fancy jumping attack, and he got scooped up. So here's the last thing that I want to mention as I look over my notes really quick. Two things that I want to mention really quick. So the boss there had the dragon head. I wonder if you're going to sever the dragon head from his arm. I know that sounds weird, and then have it for yourself. Um, and and we know from Dark Souls there was this whole thing about severing tails, turning tails into magic spells and weapons. I wonder if that's going to apply to severing heads now or other body parts. I think I mentioned that, but um, the other thing I'll mention really quick is this idea that I was that the world here is still following a very similar From Software pattern where, as I mentioned, there's this history, there's gigantic history and an apocalypse in so many words that has happened in these games. And you're just some guy now, 100, 1,000 years later, kind of just picking up the pieces and struggling to survive in this world, right? That's kind of the pattern for many of these games. And I was kind of hoping with Elden Ring that may have changed a little bit. I was kind of hoping that there would be this aspect of a more liveliness to the world because it's open world. And my first thought was, oh, they're going to have towns. Is this going to be the first From Software action RPG with towns? And I'm thinking that's not going to be the case, unfortunately. I don't really I think they may have even said as much, that there won't be anything to that effect in this game. They do mention that they want the open world, to feel more alive with animals grazing, and they wanted beautiful landscapes, just because if it was tonally all the same, it would sort of wear down on you as a player. But to me, I would have really liked to have some liveliness in terms of like a town and populated with people. To me, that's sort of like the next step, in my opinion, for From Software, to kind of create these worlds that are alive rather than dead, as they so often are. And it seems as if Elden Ring, for the most part, is going to be at least to some degree still kind of dead. The whole history and all the events and all of that stuff, and yet there's still going to be wildlife and animals and stuff, which is cool. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for now from me. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on Elden Ring. I'm just really excited, guys. I'm just really excited about this game, and I just wanted to talk about it. So please let me know your thoughts about Elden Ring. And what are you hoping for to experience in this game? What are you kind of afraid of, like in terms of like what concerns you? Is there something about it that maybe is kind of putting you off? I think it's fair to discuss that kind of stuff too. Anyways, that's enough for me. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.